If I were to read a book a week for my entire adult lifetime, and I lived an ordinary lifetime, when I was all done, I would have read maybe a few thousand books, no more. In this library, that's from about here roughly to about here. But that's only 0.1% or so of the total number of books in the library. The trick is to know which books to read.
Hello. Welcome, everyone, to Downtime. Thank you so much for joining us. With me today is Lance. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good today.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. We are going to have to talk about the major combat operations in Iran, which is just we're becoming more like Russia every day, but. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to get to today's sort of main topic, which I was thinking we could talk about, because we've been growing, and we've been getting a lot of new people on the Discord, and they've been doing a very good job of learning how we put things together and how we construct shows, because the shows are largely sort of just constructed from news channels in the Discord, where we curate what we think is important and how to best inform people about it. But there's always a lot of questions, and people say, well, how do you do this? And the reality is, I think some people have a talent for it, but it's also, as much as anything, a learned skill. And I know in your training, you also had to learn that, because you had to learn how to assess situations. How do you assess, what's the likely outcome of a given situation? How do we assess who's a good news source? So we're gonna get into all that. But first, I did want to say, so what's going on in Iran? We're in day, I want to say 6 now in Iran.
Yeah.
So what do we know?
So let's start with yesterday. Off the coast of Sri Lanka, a U.S. submarine torpedoed and sank an Iranian frigate.
Ooh.
This is the first torpedo attack conducted by an American sub since World War II.
Jesus.
Apparently, they rescued between 30 to 40 Iranian sailors out of the water. Presumably, the other 100 went down to the ship. There's video available of it, because the captain took a video, black and white video, that's kind of grainy, but you can still see what's going on when it hits. And I don't want us to show it here, but it's worth people who may have an interest in this to seeing it, because when the torpedo goes off, I mean, up until that point, this ship is just steaming quietly along, and then suddenly it rises about 30 feet out of the water, and the back end of it breaks off.
Jesus.
I mean, it's like, boom, that fast. Probably sank, I would guess, within about 2 to 3 minutes.
That has been, there was a show by Aaron Sorkin, and we've been talking a lot. I think we're going to talk a lot of television tonight and inspirational, but there was a show by Aaron Sorkin called Studio 60. In it, there is a line which actually informs in time a lot. What ends up happening is the Studio 60, like most of Sorkin's shows, it's a show in a show. And it's about a studio that does Saturday Night Live kind of skits and sketches. But they also have breaking news, and they were doing news on the Iraq War. An RPG went over a soldier's head, just missed the soldier and the embed, and the soldier goes, holy fuck! And that gets broadcast over the air, and the FCC decides that they're going to find the network for broadcasting that. And they try to negotiate with the FCC, and the FCC says, well, time delay the news 10 seconds, and then you can just, it's like, no, because the only reason to time to delay the news is to censor, give you the option of censoring. And what he said was, everybody wants to support our patriots, our soldiers. They say support our troops, but they don't want to know what our troops are going through. They don't want to see what the average day look. They support the war only so long as they don't have to know what an actual war sounds like or feels like. And so that's why, we have the shows that are the hard ones. And especially early on in Ukraine, when the maternity ward got hit, we're like, you have to have an account to watch this one because you have to be 18 or older. You can't, and we showed everything. And it's because if you're going to be informed, we don't want to make it a habit that we're always a difficult channel to watch, but you can't be informed and not know that. So, Downtime I probably wouldn't, but maybe we'll get that footage and play it. It should be on our Discord if it's not anyway. So we'll make sure that gets there. I had seen right before the explosion, so I didn't realize.
It's pretty illuminating.
Well, and 𝐒𝐚𝐬 is bragging.
Oh yeah, and then that pontificating jackass gone on, and it was almost me shoot torpedo, me sink ship. Oh.
He acts like he made the torpedo himself, loaded it into the submarine, and then fired
and guided it from behind to hit it.
Yeah.
What a complete tool.
Wow. All right. So that, and now that was in international waters. So Iran is upset about that. The attacks.
So it's okay to sink their ships in their waters, but not international waters.
And my understanding is attacks to and from Iran have gone down by between 80 and 90%. They are still hitting Israel reasonably significantly, but the rest of, and there's another area, and it wasn't Qatar that they hit, but something recently. But the overall number of missiles going back and forth has dramatically scaled off. Any thoughts on why that might be?
They may have exhausted a significant portion of their missile magazine, so to speak. And I'm sure we've destroyed a significant number of the launching sites and transport erector equipment to fire the missiles. So it becomes problematic to, even if you have 500 missiles, if you've only got 10 functioning erectors, well, it's going to take a while to shoot all 500 of them. And, you want to hold some in reserve just so if this thing continues, you can continue to retaliate.
You had mentioned this earlier, and I think
it's important to note that in addition to the Iranians running low on missiles as a possibility, we don't know that for sure. Similarly, we and our Gulf allies are running low on Patriot interceptors. So when they shoot something, it's getting, I won't say harder, but we have to be much more calculating about, do we shoot that one down or let it pass? Where does it look like it's likely to impact along that trajectory? If there's nothing vital, maybe we just let that one go.
So I saw this really interesting thing about Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about how spy satellites work. He says everyone thinks that they go around this way, but really they go around from the North to the South Pole. And the reason is that's the only way to cover the entire planet. As it rotates, you can, and you can't cover it all at once, but you can actually.
The GeoSync satellite, while it doesn't go all around, it's still kind of doing that. It's doing, if you ever see the trace of it, it's kind of like doing a figure eight over the point that it's monitoring. And that figure eight is oriented on the north-south axis.
So you and I have been talking, and I remember when the Ukrainians first started painting tanks, and it worked. And the military's like, oh my God, there's a tank. And I was just like, how does that work? And you and I had this discussion, but it was yesterday. You were on yesterday, and then after the show, we had this discussion. I wanted to bring this up because you had said that the Iranians are, and this works, they're basically taking concrete pipes, the sewage pipes, putting them on the back of trucks and running them around all over the place, and we can't always tell whether those are missiles or and so they're messing with our ability to know where they're putting their.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they're doing it, but it would be entirely logical and easy for them to do. And that kind of deception effort is nothing new. I mean, we did, the whole inflatable tank thing back in World War II. I mean, Patton, after the famous slapping incident in Sicily, was sent to Great Britain, and we tried to publicize the fact that he was going to be leading the army that would be invading at the Pas-de-Calais. Well, he was in the doghouse, and Ike didn't want him to let him command anything because he was so pissed at him. So they just used him as a decoy, and part of that was they had units sending out fake radio traffic, and then all of these inflated vehicles all over the place, so that when German reconnaissance airplanes flew over, they'd look down and say, oh, look, there's 200 tanks down there. Obviously, this is where the invasion is getting staged from. Except it wasn't. Those were all just, bounce castles.
Wow. Oh, my God. Well, so The other thing is they're now getting very touchy about what we call this, and they've passed. The White House has passed notes to all of the Republicans on Capitol Hill and to throughout the Department of Defense, saying that this needs to be called hostilities, mission, or, quote, major combat operation, which sounds an awful lot like special combat operation.
Military operation.
Yeah.
We can't use that because that would be plagiarizing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Would end up having to, Putin would probably have to pay Putin like a licensing fee or something which is just insane that we've reached that point. And then Mike Johnson came out and said, I think he said this today. It was either today or yesterday. He said, quote, they declared war on us, saying that we're not at war right now. They declared war on us for no reason. And
other than the fact that we bombed them,
which he admits we bombed them, but he's like, we had a right to bomb those facilities, and then they retaliated by hurling missiles at U.S. embassies, which is a strike on U.S. soil, by the way. And I'm quoting him. This is what he said. So they attacked us, and I'm just like, wow. Johnson never ceases to.
Well, they can't say it's a war. They have to come up with these, smoke and mirror games, because if it's a war, then Congress has to be brought in to approve it. And they don't want to do that. They want to play this as, no, this is just a counter-terrorist action, because that's covered under the post-9/11 AUMF.
Or I don't know if regime change counts as it's got to be an act of war. Trump is also.
Arguably, That's what we did in Iraq when we invaded. That's what we did in Afghanistan when we ousted the Taliban. That's regime change.
Yeah.
But it was done under the umbrella of the authorization for use of military force that Congress, like a complete bunch of bumbling buffoons, voted in after 9/11 without either a time limit or a specific clause saying what constituted an act that you could use this for.
Yeah.
And so the way it was written, and nobody in Congress called them on it, was it lasts until forever. And as long as you can say that what military action a president has committed forces to is against a terrorist action, you're good.
And anybody who called out and said, and that, you know, I understand everybody was terrified. It's terrorism. I mean, that's the tip-off. That's kind of the goal, is to get us to do insane things and basically destroy ourselves, because Al-Qaeda is no match for the U.S. militarily. But you couldn't sit there and say...
That's why we were there for, 12 years and eventually had to leave whimpering with our tail between our legs.
Yeah, fair point. They tried to blow up 12 transatlantic flights. They tried to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel. They tried to blow up all the tunnels. They tried to kill the Pope. They tried to do all of these things, and they failed at all of it for 20 years. 20 years. They had successfully detonated a car bomb in the parking garage of one of the towers to try to bring it down, and it didn't even damaged a pillar that wouldn't have done. So, I mean, they finally succeed, and our response is, let's create the largest bureaucracy ever and hand over unlimited power to the president so long as he uses certain magic phrases. And if you pointed that out, you were for the terrorists. Yeah, it was. And now Congress, not once but twice, failed to try to rein in that bill and Trump's authority to conduct operations in Iran. They failed yesterday, and they said, well, you know, we don't want to just fail once, so they tried. The House did it today. Each chamber got a whack at failing it. So yeah, you're not allowed to call it a war. But nobody sent the memo to Trump, who keeps talking. It's just great when he goes, because it's a war, and we all know it's a war, and it's like, I feel like I'm being gaslit by our own country. So, as you know, Kristi Noem is out, and her replacement is Congressman. Oh dear, I've let me see if I can find his name. I'm sorry, what?
No, it's not Murkowski. It's somebody else. I can't remember.
Let me.
The right-wing white supremacist is a-hole.
Well, we've actually got we've got a. Let's see. His name is Senator Mullen, and we've got footage of him at a hearing. So let's play that so that you can get used to who the new head of Homeland Security is going to be. This is Senator Mullen.
This here in the last time, him and I kind of had a back and forth. Appreciate your demeanor today. It's quite different. But after you left here, you got pretty excited about the keyboard. In fact, you tweeted at me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And let me read what the last one said. It said, "Greedy CEO who pretends like he's self-made." Sir, I wish you was in the truck with me when I was building my plumbing company myself, and my wife was running the office, because I sure remember working pretty hard and long hours. Pretends like he's self-made. What a clown. Fraud. Always has been, always will be. Quit the tough guy act in these Senate hearings. You know where to find me. Any place, anytime, cowboy. Sir, this is a time, this is a place. If you want to run your mouth, we can be two consenting adults. We can finish it here.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold on.
Big guy.
Oh, stop it. Is that your solution, every
Hold it. No, sit down. Sit down.
Look at you.
You know, you're a United States Senator.
Fucking
Sit down.
interesting.
Oh, okay.
Sit down, please.
All right.
Can I respond, Mr.
Hold
Chairman?
it. Hold it. If
Hold
we
on.
can't, no,
This is
I have
what
the
he
mic.
said.
I'm sorry.
This is
Hold
what
it.
he said.
You'll have your time.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Oh, no, you can't. This is a hearing. And God knows the American people have enough contempt for Congress. Let's not
I don't
make
like
it worse.
thugs and bullies.
You have,
And that's
you
what-
have
I don't like you, because you
Hold
just
it.
described yourself.
Hold it.
He literally threatened to just have a fist fight right in the. That's our new. Yeah. Can we? I'm hold on. I'm gonna call. Does somebody have the number for the? I want to call Donnie right now and be like, can we have Christie back?
I mean, I can't remember the name of it. There's a famous instance in the lead up to the Civil War where a Southern senator took his cane and almost beat I think it was a Republican, to death
Oh my
on
God.
the floor of the Senate.
Well, and I mean,
And
yeah.
these people hold that act and things like that as an example of good leadership.
yep.
Those
Yeah.
are the heroes.
He's clearly not going to make things any better than the puppy assassin. I can't believe that's this is I wish this was a joke. That's Trump's replacement for Kristi Noem. So now you've all met him. I did want to cover briefly.
I mean, she's not being fired per se. She's
Yeah,
being
yeah.
reassigned
Yes, and
a job at an agency that doesn't exist.
yes, I noticed that, and the agency is apparently going to get some funding.
Yeah,
But-
it's basically bribing her by paying her off. You'll still get your salary.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's exactly. And she's like, I look forward to working with the Secretary of Defense and all these people and her job is global security for the entire hemisphere, apparently for all of the Americas. So it actually almost looks on paper like a promotion. I suppose because it's security for all of the, oh my God. Did you hear about the other health scare too? Because we've actually found Trump had that rash. It looks really nasty along the skin. So the doctor actually answered what that was. So I would like to put that up here, and there we go. So somebody has correctly identified Trump there. So, all right. Well, I think, have we missed anything that we wanted to cover in terms of news? I think we hit the basics and what we needed to hit today.
So the only thing I would add is that yesterday there was a story about a missile that had been fired at Turkey that NATO
Yes.
brought down.
Yes.
Pulling the thread on that today, it sounds like it's a missile or a drone that went astray because it flies over Syria and then kind of starts wandering off course. Looks like it might be headed, towards Turkey, and that's when it's brought down. But yeah, the connection with it was targeted at Turkey now seems a little tenuous.
All right. So it flew over Turkey and they responded
No,
and
it never entered Turkish airspace.
Oh, it never. Oh, okay.
It was over the Mediterranean.
Okay. Could it errant, or could it have been hit by something
We know
and was
that the
damaged?
U.S. Air Force is using bases in Cyprus that are brought operated by the British.
Mhm.
And it may have been targeted at that, and it just went off course and looked, instead of heading toward Cyprus, it was heading for Turkey. Who knows?
All right. Well, I'm glad that the number of missiles is going down. I'm concerned because Trump has now declared that the U.S. has veto power over whoever they select as Ayatollah, and that's that's not in their constitution, to the best of my understanding. So we'll see.
You were saying that the new Ayatollah was in place for all of 8 hours before.
Yeah, they had the temporary one. Yeah, they had a interim Ayatollah, lasted 8 hours before he was killed.
It was a gas leak in his apartment.
Yeah. So I kudos to the intelligence communities. I wish it was ours, but most of ours seem so pissed at Trump that they've quit, and I'm aware that or been fired. And I
love the fact that, like, 3 weeks before this, something like 70% of all the FBI, NSA, and CIA counterterrorism experts were fired.
Well, and it's yeah, you would point it out.
Nothing suspicious about that.
Yeah.
How do you spell false flag again?
Oh dear. Yeah. Well, and actually, there's no King's rally on the 28th.
Yep.
About which I'm mildly concerned, but I think we can talk about that later. I will say it's interesting watching the lack of professionalism and how it affects, what's her name? The lawyer who refused to give up Attorney General of Virginia, and she wasn't properly assigned, and she refused to give it up. She's now being looked at, and she's probably going to lose her license. I doubt they're going to do anything criminal. I haven't heard about them doing anything criminal, but certainly she's going to lose her license to practice, and they're going to be going after others, I hope, at the state level, at least states bars associations. But it's like between that and the what was the job posting that you had mentioned? This is what happens when you get rid of all the competent people.
Yeah.
The job posting for the someone.
Yeah. So just to let the audience know what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Dover Air Force Base, which is in Maryland, which is where all the returning U.S. deceased service personnel from overseas are brought back for processing and so forth. Today put up a ad for an individual to manage deceased service personnel's personal effects when they came in. So it's like you clean them, you make sure that the dirty movies that was in his foot locker isn't sent to his mom, that kind of thing. So they put that up as a jobs opening at Dover Air Force Base. And within about 30 minutes, it got taken down. Because one of the things that some people have been saying is that we're hiding the fact that the casualties are far, far more extensive. Sorry, Delaware, whatever.
Well, and that is, I mean, Trump is he's a narcissist, and I don't think he's capable of feeling empathy per se, but I don't think, I've never seen anything that, he doesn't seem to delight in war the way 𝐒𝐸. He really does seem to want to end wars for whatever reason. And it's just, it's an odd
I think
thing.
To him, war is a threatening club you hold over people's heads to get them to do what you want them to do. You don't ever want to actually use the club, because when you do, then they're not likely to pay you a bribe.
Titan point. Yeah, he also wants he wants the credit for ending wars. Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. So everybody talks about 4D chess and who's moving what pieces. We've talked about Palantir. We've talked about Elon Musk and what various people want. And there seems to be so many layers that people have a hard time wrapping their head around. I think people also often want to just sort of give up and say, I don't want to think about this thing because we're never going to know who's really pulling the levers and what it is that they're trying to do. Sure. And they've been, the first time I even sort of became aware of that was the Koch brothers and going, well, probably a little before that. But, and I think even if ultimately there's no way to know, and I don't think that's true. I think there's only so many layers. I don't think the onion is infinite. There's an infinite regress there. But, I think it's worth trying to do as much as you can to understand as deep as you can and what the consequences are of your actions, of who you vote for or don't vote for. And so that's one of the things that we at In Time try to do. And we try to break down the news and also put it into a context. So part of that context is learned. We've learned history and we say this is how it fits in. But also part of it is our own biases. We're on the liberal side and we admit that. So if somebody wants advice on how do I pick, let's just start at how do I pick a good news source? How would you advise someone on something like that?
What I do is I type in a search, and I use Google for, let's assume, U.S. submarine sinks Iranian ship. And then I see what comes up and I'll read, whatever strikes my fancy in the first page of offerings. Typically, because of the way Google structures itself, that'll be some mainstream news source here in the US. Occasionally, it'll be somebody from overseas, like the BBC or Deutsche Welle or whatever. And that's fine. And then I go to the second page that are not necessarily part of, the group that's involved in whatever the action is. So in this case, I don't know, maybe India, because India is relatively near Sri Lanka, where the sub is allegedly launched its attack on the Iranian ship. So you see what the Indians have had to say about it. And then you look for, well, what did the Australians have to say? What did the Japanese have to say? Believe it or not, sometimes I'll look and see if I can find a English version of a Russian source or a Chinese source to see what they say. And in between all those different sources, you start to get an idea of what the real story is, because everybody's had a chance to put their spin on it. And the truth typically lies somewhere in the middle of where all that spin is going, because everybody wants the spin to go in their direction.
So is it like over time, do you start to find ones that are more your go-to when you don't have the time to go through all of them, that you've said, okay, this is a reliable, reasonably reliable source?
Yeah. So for example, on the situation in Ukraine, my standard go-to is the Institute for the Study of Warfare. Mm-hmm. And they're non-biased, they're reliable, they have a good analysis of what things mean. So they don't just tell you Russia has announced it's going to conscript an additional 250,000 troops into its military this season. They tell you what they last time they conscripted personnel into the armed forces was. They tell you how many of the people that actually showed up for that call up. So if they were trying to call up 150 and only 100 showed up, they tell you that. And it gives you a fairly clear idea of all the different levels of what's going on in there. Now, I'm sure if you asked somebody who was on the Russian, Putin is God crowd, they would say ISW is not a unbiased source, that they're part of the NATO spin team making it all.
Yep.
You could make that argument, sure, but they're at least a little less obvious about being biased than, say, looking at what Rush TV says or something.
Well, and you're not going to find a perfect source anywhere.
No.
There's no such thing. So,
which is why I like to look at 2 or 3 different sources.
Well, and I think what happens is people start to get overwhelmed and say, well, if there's no such thing as a perfect source, then I'm going to just shut down and not pay attention to the news. I think that's why one of the reasons people are disengaging with the news is because, well, if every source is going to have its bias, including in time, then, why bother even trying? And I think there are ways that, and I think what you've just outlined here, which is comparing what a number of sources say, especially if it's on a topic that you know or understand well, can be a good indicator of who's a reliable source. There's no such thing as a source that's 100%. It's just different degrees of reliability. So how do you start to read between the lines? Because the mainstream media reports on a lot of things that are true, but then you have to ask yourself how and why. So we've gone into Iran. And one of the things that I know is that we've given a lot of reasons why we've gone into Iran. None of them seem to make a lot of sense to me. So the next question is, why did we go into Iran? So if you want to figure that out, and there's no news or source that's outright saying this is why we went into Iran, you want to try to work at the next layer and say who's pulling the gears and why. How do you go about doing that?
So in that case, why did the U.S. decide to go into Iran when it did?
Yeah.
That's a complicated question because it requires you to have a fairly deep knowledge of the background of the situation. So in this case, it's, what's the situation in Iran? Why is the U.S. necessarily hostile to Iran? Why is Iran hostile towards the U.S.? Why is Trump doing this now when apparently from some leaks that have come out from reliable sources, they were on the verge of, giving in to all our demands about the nuclear situation, which is what they're claiming we are attacking them for was, they were on the verge of getting a bomb. Well, if they were going to allow you to do unfettered IAEA inspections and they were going to shut down the whole program, which they'd never agreed to before. They said they would, tone it down, but never cut it off. This time was like, we're going to completely dismantle it. Why, when that happened, did you decide to bomb? So then you have to start looking at, well, who are the decision makers? Did they have a vested interest in this? And then when you do that, you start looking at, well, let's see. Trump's daughter is married to Kushner, who is from a family that has very close ties with Israel and Mossad. And those groups have been really pushing the agenda on, look, the Iranians are going to have a nuclear weapon in the next 5 minutes, so we need to bomb them now. And they've been doing this for over 30 years. You add all this together and you start saying, well, maybe there's something on that end of the scale. Maybe Trump has some personal stuff going on between him and Netanyahu, who we know are good buds. Maybe there's money changing hand under a table. We don't know, but you can speculate because you've seen at that point, when you start looking at the background of somebody like Trump, that's the kind of process he goes through with most deals he makes. It's, what I can get out of it as opposed to what is necessarily good for the country or the company or what have you.
Certainly. So we know a couple of things. First of all, he's making Benjamin Netanyahu very happy, and he's actually opened up a front himself against Hezbollah. He's always been fighting Hezbollah, but he's now gone into Lebanon. He's gone. They're now evacuating southern Beirut, and they are striking in Beirut, which they have not done in a very long time. You'd know better than I would if and when they've actually gone as far as Beirut. Do you happen to have
I
that?
don't think the Israelis have ever done that.
Okay.
That far. They have moved into substantial portions of southern Lebanon, allegedly to establish a buffer zone between Israel and where Hezbollah would be launching rockets at them and such. But it looks, at least from the diagrams that I've seen coming out, which you showed yesterday, they're looking at a much bigger push this time. And Bibi is answerable to his political coalition. And many of those people in his coalition are ones who have been advocating for the reestablishment of Greater Israel, which is basically, everything from the Suez Canal to Damascus.
I will bet you I can find a map.
Beirut, it's huge. And that's what they're looking at. So if you force everybody out of southern Lebanon to make it a buffer zone, and a year or two later, you're looking there and say, look at all these empty homes. We've got so many people that are just dying to have homes to live in because they have they're living in these cramped apartments in Jerusalem. Maybe we could have them move into these houses. And that's where the whole settlement process begins.
So, I think people get intimidated by how much it seems like you need to know if you're going to start, trying to get into understanding things like that. So if you don't necessarily know the history of the U.S. and Iran, or the history of Netanyahu and almost the entire Middle East,
I would argue you have to go back further than that.
Okay.
Now, it arguably, at least as far as the end of World War I and the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and where all those, frankly, artificial borders came from that divide up the Middle East into its current nations. It doesn't make sense until you go back then, and then you see that a lot of what we're dealing with today is a direct result of those bad decisions then. And I'm sure if you wanted to trace it further, you could go back and look at Ottoman times and how they set up their jurisdiction with the various vilayets that were, in that region.
That's actually what they're saying now is that this war that we're fighting in Iran has actually been going on since 1979, and that we are now finishing what...
I think I would go back into I'd have to check when it was. My mind wants to say like 59, when the revolution that installed the Shah occurred.
I think that was 59.
I would go back that far. And in fact, you could go back to World War II, because Britain, the US, and Russia all invaded Iran Persia at the time, at roughly the same time, because they needed to open routes through there for the Lend-Lease that we were providing. And part of that is that the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was busily trying to incite uprisings against the British, cause pro-Arab, insurrections to take over all those areas, and they were going to be aligned with Nazi Germany. So, you go back that far. for where we are, for why Iran is the mess it's in today.
So actually, before I get to that, so this is, I've got two maps now of what is purported to be Greater Israel, which is ostensibly the goal that Netanyahu, he doesn't peddle publicly that I'm aware of. He's shown maps of Israel.
He doesn't public it or peddle it publicly, but people in his political coalition definitely do.
Yes, everybody on the far right, I've forgotten the name of that coalition. This is their view of what is the land that is theirs. So this is one map from Cornell University, and I've got this. This one's just, here we go. So this shows
the size of that.
Yeah,
it's most of Syria, most of Iraq, northern Saudi Arabia,
yep,
and Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt, not just the Sinai, but, basically up to the Nile.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And
got to remember the size of the Israeli population compared to the populations of all those Arab states that they're talking about, basically kicking everybody out of.
How many, I don't know why I want to say 3 million. That's got to be way too small. How many, what's the population of Israel? If you happen not to.
My computer upstairs, I tell you, I have a whole briefing sheet I wrote up for myself. My guess is it's something like 8 or 9 million.
Oh, you got it. 10.1 million, approximately.
And don't forget that a significant portion of that are actually Muslims and Arabs.
21% Arab.
So you've got 10 million, roughly. That means only 8 million are Jews, 2 million are Arab Muslims.
So when you encounter a new situation, and you had given me this example about when you were in War College, and you were given a hypothetical, which I like to do. I say, okay, you're Putin. What do you do now? And we break down the war in Iraq. I think what they had asked you was, okay, you're the advisor to either Lyndon B. Johnson.
The question they posed to us at War College was, you are an advisor to the just elected President Kennedy, and you want to brief him on what you recommend as the course of action to deal with the situation in Vietnam.
All right. So, and this is post, is this after they've sort of figured out that there's no winning, but nobody wants to pull out? Or because nobody wants to be the president?
Point, the U.S. really didn't have much in the way of a presence inside Vietnam. We had training missions. You don't get the real massive buildup of U.S. forces in there until after the Gulf of Tonkin.
I forgot. Yep.
LBJ, not JFK.
That's right. I spaced it. Yep. So, okay. So you're given an assignment like that. Yeah. And we all have assignments like that. I mean, that's us every day, really, in as much as, and when we're talking about the news, it's like, okay, we've found a situation, we want to predict. This is in part, when you're trying to figure out who you're going to vote for, you're sitting there saying, okay, is this candidate really telling me the truth, or are they telling me what I want to hear, so I'll vote for them? So we're always trying to, how do you break down a problem like that, to start to make sense of it so that you can at least take a stab at making a decision that might be productive?
Sure. So I'll use the same example you started with, of my paper about Vietnam. I was kind of unique in the whole class because everybody else was either don't send any troops at all and abandon Vietnam. I think only one other guy said that. Most of them would, send in more and more troops, and we need to strategically bomb and mine ports and yada, 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 and all this stuff. And my argument was co-opt the North. Ho Chi Minh had, as far back as the Versailles Treaty Conference, approached the American legation at that conference and said, look, I want America's help in removing France as the colonial power in Southeast Asia to establish a government of the people of the region so we can govern ourselves. Nobody would see him.
Yeah.
Again, at the end of World War II, and my dad knew the guy that was attached to the OSS mission that was supporting the Viet Minh at the time. And he said, again, Ho Chi Minh had approached him and said, I need you to ask Washington to please help us prevent the French from coming back and reestablishing their colony here in Vietnam. We want our own country. Again, that was turned down. Now, in that case, it was because at that point, Ho had come out basically as a communist, and we were entering into that wonderful period where everything on the planet was divided into red and blue, and if you were red, you were bad, and therefore we couldn't trust you. And my argument was, no, the guy is first and foremost a nationalist. He's no different than Tito. He doesn't trust or like the Russians. He doesn't trust or like the Chinese. He wants an independent state for the Vietnamese people. If we back him, he may still be communist, but so what? We've kept our real adversaries out. He's just a nationalist wearing red underwear. Who cares? And the two professors that were running my section said they'd never seen anybody in the 6 years that they've been using that same question. They'd never seen anybody answer the question in that format. So my argument here is the same. If you're going to ask, well, if you're Putin, what do you do now? Stop thinking inside that box. Everybody says, if you're Putin, you either have to win or you have to find some way of declaring victory so that the oligarchs don't rise up and kill you. I would contend, if I were an advisor to Putin, I would say, find some way to extricate yourself from the situation. You're already, if not certainly one of the top 10 richest humans on the planet. Retire to a gilded exile. You're already, what, 80 or something?
Yeah.
It's time to say that's enough. What you do is you find somebody else to hand this reeking turd bucket to and say, here, it's your problem now, bub. You're the president. I'm leaving. Bye. Take off with your booty before anybody can stop you. You safely extricate yourself. It's no longer your problem. And then whoever's behind you, it's their mess to clean up. And oddly enough, that benefits Russia as well, because without the baggage of being Putin who started the war, that guy can now actually enter into honest negotiations with Ukraine.
He's got plausible deniability on even if he was a direct advisor of well, it also sounds like actually what we had originally intended, your solution on the Vietnam was sort of along the lines of Afghanistan and supporting the Taliban, which if we had, or the Mujahideen, sorry, if we had stayed in Afghanistan as we had promised, and or continued support for the northern Kurds in Iraq, if we had done either of those as we had promised, would probably be facing easier times now, I would assume. Is that do you think, a safe guess, or I mean, there's always going to be.
I would look at those as two separate problems.
Okay.
So let's start with the Kurdish one, because I'm a little more well versed in that.
Okay.
And I think we talked about this yesterday, which is that the Kurds, and again, we go back to that wonderful time at the Versailles Treaty Conference, the Allied powers had wanted to create an independent Kurdistan. They couldn't find anybody to speak for the Kurds because the Kurds were so busy feuding among themselves that there was nobody that kind of stood up as their George Washington, if you will. So, you know, how do you deal with it today? It's really tough, because if you try to back some sort of move to create an independent Kurdistan, you piss off Turkey, because the second largest concentration, or actually, I have to check. Give me a sec.
Take your time. While you're doing that, I just got this.
No, the largest,
Okay. Yep.
the single largest concentration of Kurds live in Turkey. Turkey has been fighting a war with them since Ottoman.
Oh, Jesus.
So if you start saying, yeah, we're going to support an independent Kurdistan, what does that do to Turkey? We're already having trouble with Erdogan. Do we want Turkey to, you know, give the middle finger to NATO, get out and decide, well, I'm going to start flexing my muscles and become a regional power?
Yeah.
You know, does that make our lives easier? Hell no, it complicates them. So you have to find some way to try to do something for the Kurds without pissing off the Turks. So even if you said, okay, we're willing to advocate for a separate autonomous region inside Iran for the Kurds, Turkey's going to oppose that, because to them, that means that's another area that they can start amassing weaponry and funneling it in to fight Turkey.
Yep.
And it's hard to express unless you've actually been there. The war that the Turks are fighting against the Kurds is pretty active. I mean, there are attacks on police stations and military outposts and bombs and everything going off in eastern Turkey all the damn time.
All right. So, and Turkey has always been that wild card, because they almost don't belong in NATO.
What makes it worse is they do not recognize Kurdish as a separate, ethnic group within the country.
Oh.
They recognize, a lot of the other groups, but they don't recognize the Kurds as being separate and distinct from being Turks.
So giving them their own land is a big FU to the entire concept of how Turkey identifies itself and deals with.
Right. And it's also Turkey doesn't have much in the way of oil deposits, but what it does have, they're in that area.
So how about, so that's the Kurds. What about the Mujahideen, who ultimately became the Taliban?
So what do you do there? Okay. The key thing I think to understand there is that the Taliban is not a monolithic structure. There are different factions within the Taliban, just as there are different factions within the Iranian Islamic Republic. Some are more moderate than others.
Yeah.
If we'd been wise, instead of just pulling stakes and running as we did, if we'd started trying to work with the moderate factions of the Taliban and come to some agreement that allowed us to continue to maintain U.S. military presence there, let's say Bagram Air Base or something, just a minor thing. It was that one thing. And we'll continue to support you. You know, there'll be an annual stipend which we'll give you to help build the country, but you have to concede certain points. You know, women are allowed to go to school. Women are allowed to have presence in certain professions. They may be restricted to only operating with other women. That's fine. You know, we do the same kind of thing with Saudi Arabia and some of the other Arab nations in the Gulf region who are our allies. You know, you could have used some imagination to come up with a solution that wouldn't have just plunged the nation back into chaos, allowing the extremists to once again take power.
And that actually reminds me of what Theo said from democracies versus dictators versus democracies, which is I always sort of felt like, and I think it's because I grew up in a democracy, that democracy was the default position. It's like, no, dictatorship is the default position because it's the most extreme people who are...
History, up until essentially the American Revolution, you don't really have much in the way of, democracies. And before anybody starts saying, what about ancient Greece and Athens? What about the Roman Republic? Those were not democracies. It was the elites, the aristocracy that ran things, and they got to vote amongst themselves on what they were going to do. But, the average guy in the street, he had no say in things.
Well, when we pull all support for democracy in Afghanistan, without the infrastructure that the U.S. could supply, it's going to be the most extremists who are going to, and unfortunately, also the ones who are going to get murdered first are the ones who cooperated with the U.S., which is not very good long-term strategy for.
And it all boils down to one key question that I think needs to be asked, which we in this country never really did a plebiscite or whatever you want to call it about, which is, do we as Americans want to effectively become the world policeman, or at least the watch captain of the world police? And that's what happened after World War II, is effectively we took that role on.
Yeah.
We had other deputies, Britain, France, and so forth, but for the most part, we were the ones that were calling the shots. And after World War II, there was kind of a sense that, we need to do this because it's the only way to maintain order and keep the situation around the globe relatively stable. But the farther we got from World War II and that GI generation who fought that war and done those sacrifices to eliminate fascism, and understood that the same situation was in place with the communists. So there was, to some degree, agreement in the American electorate back then that, that's a role we want to take on. But the further we got from that, particularly once you start getting into the 60s and 70s with, all the new generation thinking and all of that, people aren't thinking, at least the young people aren't thinking in those terms anymore. And we never actually sat ourselves down and said, is this a role we want to continue to have?
Yeah.
Or do we want to relinquish it and give it to somebody else? Now, the problem with that is that power doesn't exist in a vacuum. We couldn't just step away and say, okay, Britain, you got it. What would have happened is we'd step away and the Russians would look around and say, damn, look at this wonderful opportunity.
Yeah. Or China, too. China's already doing that.
Didn't start coming out of that until, realistically speaking, the mid-'80s. So, and it's kind of a question, I think, we're coming up on generational constellation change again, maybe it's time for us as the American people to step back for a moment and ask ourselves, is this a role we no longer want to be filling? And understand the ramifications of saying no.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is most people just look at it as, we don't want to bear the expense of having to keep, the world's largest military by a factor of 20, because those are social programs we could be running, or we could at least lower our taxes to where people were not being taxed out of existence. But then you have to ask yourself, if you do step away from that role, what happens in terms of world order? Does it descend into chaos? And I would argue that's kind of what we're seeing happening right now.
Well, and somebody's going to step up to fill that position, and judging by what it's going to be the dictators, it's going to be the tyrants, it's going to be the people who are interested in amassing power. The people who are interested in power being a communal thing and sharing it aren't the ones who step up, and you rarely get the George Washington. Yeah. So
the one greatest line I always remember, and I don't remember where I heard it, but it was something along the lines of, you don't want a leader who wants power. You want a leader who has power thrust upon them as they're kicking and screaming, trying to get away from the responsibility.
All right, let's see. We've got Daddy Jim, fella UA. Great to see Lance and Nick on the case, and then Ukrainian hearts there. Thank you, Daddy Jim. So good to see you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So I thought, it would be nice to, we're still doing the news, but talk about how we break some of this stuff down. Come join us on the Discord if you're not there yet. And I think it reminds me of Brexit, where it was like, for the outsiders, so many of us on the outside were like, do you guys even understand what you're like, when they were like, we're going to get all this money back that we put into the system. It's like,
no. You're going to lose money.
It's not how it works. I'm just like, it's not how it works. And nobody bothered to figure out how it works. And I was just like, wow. And I feel like we're in the same
small group of very wealthy people that figured that if they could exploit the situation to make themselves even richer and more powerful than they were.
Yep.
And so they sold the British people a load of crap.
Yep.
And they bought it. And that's why you got Brexit.
And this idea that, the U.S. is suffering too much as we do suffer, but not a heck. And I still have such a difficult time with just the idea that somebody can hold these two simultaneous thoughts in their head at the same time. One, that we are the greatest country in the world. And they'll tell us that, and they'll tell everybody they know that, and they'll make sure they broadcast on, okay, we're the greatest country in the world. Two, we got there and were the police of the world. It wasn't because those were two unrelated things. The fact that we've been having our hand in so many pies and screwing up so many of them as well, but those two are completely unrelated. And that we haven't had a huge benefit from the world reserve currency being ours, from everybody wanting to, not everybody, but so many countries wanting to curry favor with us, and yada, yada, yada. And that's a burden as much as anything, sure, but we get so much out of that. This idea, too, we could leave NATO and it would be fine. It's like, this Golden Dome missile shield, where are we going to... That's why he wants Greenland, is because,
Golden Dome.
Golden Dome, I know.
Golden showers, more like.
oh, dear Lord. Oh, we got this. I
hate to say it, but the way missiles and drones and all of that work, if you finally get a reliable defense system that will protect you from it, your adversary will figure out some other way to get at you. That's the law of the jungle.
And we've seen that. I mean, we've seen that. We're seeing it right now in Ukraine. We're seeing it right. I mean, with the drones and the pace at which they learn to create new systems to defend themselves and then new systems to overcome that. And we see that in Israel. The Israeli Iron Dome was purportedly and once thought to be basically impenetrable. And now it's like, well, no, because they can fly so many fake missiles at it and just overwhelm the thing. And then, it helps. Don't get me wrong, but yeah.
That's the whole thing that I don't think people really understand about the Patriot batteries.
Mm-hmm.
It's an outstanding air defense missile system. The trouble is, it's predicated on you having not air supremacy, but at least something resembling air superiority. And it's also predicated on other stuff going on so that your opponent can't overwhelm you because he has to use his assets for other things. So, yeah, it'll take out the leakers that are coming through your air defenses that are trying to hit your airfield or something. But, facing what you're facing right now, which is, what was it, the first night, the Iranians, between missiles and drones, there was something like 550 inbounds on Israel that first night. Yeah.
Well,
how are you going to stop all that? Particularly if it's all pretty much coming at the same time.
That's about the only solution they found. This is funny that, for all the technology, we still dig holes with shovels. The number one defense that they have is part of their building code. You cannot build anything in Israel without a bomb shelter in it, and they all go into and that's why they receive so few casualties. You can destroy a lot of buildings, but it's hard to do because they see them coming.
Conversely, look at how many casualties Iran is suffering.
Yep.
And that's with us, at least. Can't say for the same for the Israelis, but at least on our side, we're trying to minimize collateral damage.
Yep.
That's the way we do our targeting, because it's wasteful.
I'm wondering if Hegseth appears to be, and then we'll wrap this up, but I wanted to point this out. Hegseth appears to be dying to use AI. I mean, he is chomping at the bit to have
he has
autonomous.
No understanding of what it is.
Yeah.
It's a buzzword that makes him all excited.
I know. And I'm curious if the school, I know we hit civilian targets by accident all the time. I know there's no way to avoid it, but I am curious if that school bombing was a human error, or if on orders somebody was just told, oh no, have Claude do the targeting for you and pick targets and take a look at a map and figure it out. And they just tried it. And that was its first shot. Or bad intel. There you go.
No, the intel could have said, no, that building is the, arms store for the local besieged militia. Yeah, let's drop a weapon on that. Boom.
Yep. Oh, an AI. Yeah, but before an AI can be in the military, I think we have to have a rule that there has to be intelligence at the top of the military. That you actually have to have real intelligence in the Secretary of Defense position. Then you can talk about AI. All right. Well, it's been marvelous talking to you about all of these things. Any final thoughts before we go?
No, I would keep an eye on both what's going on with the war. Let's call it what it is. There's a lot of speculation that I'm seeing, and I can't say I think it's entirely wrong, that if we do, in fact, want to precipitate regime change, we are going to need to put boots on the ground. Yeah. So if we start seeing substantial numbers of U.S. ground troops flowing into the area, that's an indication that, yeah, the invasion is coming. And again, it's just like with these airstrikes. I told you, I think, 2-3 weeks ago, yeah, this is coming. you do not spend that amount of money to flow that level of force into an area and then not use it.
Yep. Oh yeah, I mean, especially the second carrier. Once the second carrier starts going up, it's just like, okay.
And then, in addition to that, I'd also keep your eyes on the administration in terms of reshuffling. I think 𝐒𝐚 is just the first of several who's going to get reassigned.
I was wondering about Patel. I think has to be pretty close to, just because his shenanigans and antics are just making them all look bad, and he doesn't look serious. They at least try to pretend they're Pam Bondi when she's in almost at court, when she's testifying before Congress. You know, she's asking idiot questions and doing this thing, but she's trying to look serious. You know, she's dressed well. She's just like, well, your district is doing this, and she's making it look like she's got gotchas. It doesn't fool it fools some people, but doesn't fool very many people. But Kash Patel is sitting there drinking beers with the gold medal from the hockey team and the whole 9 yards, and flying his girlfriend around and getting her own protection detail. I think he's next. I don't think he's going to get rid of Bondi. I think they're besties. Is my thinking.
Patel is also pigmentally challenged, let's put it politely.
Yes.
And since he's basically pushing a white America agenda,
I had not even considered that. Hold on a sec. What is... all right. Titan.
I think Patel was brought in the first place because he was hoping to get both the money that Patel would bring with him and also the support of the growing Indian American tech community that has a lot of influence these days. And I think it's kind of become obvious that neither of those is really coming to pass to the degree that he wants. So at that point, Patel becomes a liability rather than an asset.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually surprised he lasted as long as he did. I thought he was going to go first, even before Kristi Noem, but she just became a lightning rod after the
ice on.
Yep. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for another good show. What we're going to do is we're going to send you off to, I just set it up and now I don't even know. Was it Dylan Burns? No, we're going to set, Mark Reed is streaming now, so we're going to send you to our buddy Mark Reed. Do please say hi to him. I will be joining you guys after we unwind the show. I got this. I thought this was appropriate. So, yeah. Oh, dear. So, thank you all for joining us, and our next scheduled show, of course, is Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern with Zandering, but I'm sure, I have a sneaking suspicion, and since tomorrow's a Friday, we'll have to see, but in the meantime, come join us on the Discord, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time. Lance, thank you again.
Take care.
Yep.